If you're hesitant about getting a COVID vaccine because you have questions about the approval status, how these vaccines have been tested, then this video is for you. Here at Health Wealth, my goal is not only to make you a financially better investor and to strengthen your financial wealth, but also I'd like to address health-related topics because, after all, what is all the money worth in the world if you don't have any health? So, based on my over 15 years of working experience in the healthcare industry, a PhD in biomedical engineering, I'd like to address some common questions and misconceptions that you may have come across, and they may make you hesitant to obtain the COVID-19 vaccine. The COVID pandemic, which started in late 2019, is an unprecedented threat to public health. By the middle of September in 2021, there have now been roughly 219 million cases worldwide of COVID infections and 4.5 million deaths related to COVID-19. As we enter into the 1.5 year mark and counting of this pandemic, we owe an absolute thank you to all the countless healthcare workers around the globe who work tirelessly to treat the people who have to be unfortunately admitted to the emergency rooms for treatment of COVID. Likewise, we owe a big thank you to all the researchers and pharmaceutical industries who have in record time been able to develop effective vaccines against COVID-19. And this has happened in record time. Vaccines are by far the most effective weapon in the arsenal of medical treatments against severe illness and disease, including, in this case, the pandemic COVID-19 infections. So, if you care about your own health, the health of your loved ones around you, and people you interact on a daily basis with, you owe it to yourself to consider getting a COVID vaccine. However, I fully appreciate and understand that some of you may be hesitant to get the vaccine because you may not fully understand or have questions about the regulatory status, the approval, and the testing that has gone on in order to provide these vaccines so rapidly on the market. If you have concerns and questions related to the safety of the available COVID vaccines, then this is the chapter for you. I'd like to address the questions of safety and efficacy of vaccines without going into the specific details of how this is done in each country, as I intend to address a global audience. So, regardless whether you live in the US and the FDA is your health authority, if you live in Europe and it would be EMA, or in any other country, you can be certain that the paramount parameters that any agency will look at is if the benefits of a vaccine and a treatment outweigh the associated risks. So here, regulatory agencies such as the FDA in the US or the European Medicines Agency take into consideration what type of treatments are available to address a particular disease on the market already, and which benefits and risks a new treatment, such as a new vaccine, can bring. As we have discussed on this channel in many other videos before, safety and efficacy are always determined through clinical trials. And this is no different when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines. So, if the terminology such as emergency use authorization or conditional marketing authorization confuse you, then know the following. No regulatory agency anywhere in the world would ever allow unsafe medicines or unsafe vaccines to be brought to the market. All COVID vaccines were also required to go through the clinical trial phases 1, 2, and 3. If you have watched any other of the videos on my channel, I leave a link here also to the orphan drug playlist, you will already know that these clinical trial phases can be extremely long. And when faced with a global public health crisis, such as the COVID-19 pandemic, regulatory agencies around the world have various kinds of fast-track status, which allows an accelerated review of the submissions of the clinical trial data in order to accelerate the approval and to allow to bring to market these dearly needed vaccines in order to address and ensure the safety of the general population. So, if the available COVID vaccines in your country or area are still available under a fast-track approval, Those vaccines are absolutely safe. This does not mean that your regulatory agency has taken any steps or skipped over the necessary review of the clinical trial data obtained through the phases 1, 2, and 3. And as a side note, on August 23rd, the FDA in the US approved the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine for those 16 years and older. That said, I'd like to introduce another concept you may not be fully aware of that is common practice in the pharmaceutical industry and equally applies to vaccines. And this is the concept of so-called pharmacovigilance. Pharmacovigilance simply means that the job of the market authorization holder, let's say for a vaccine, is done after they have completed and submitted the phase 3 clinical trial data. Nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, the manufacturer of any medicinal product, medical devices, or vaccines are required to continuously monitor the safety and efficacy of their products from market feedback. Any user of medicines, such as vaccines, but also prescribing physicians, should in fact report to the competent authorities, including the manufacturers of the drugs, any adverse reactions or complications that resulted in connection to taking a particular medicine. And based on this so-called market feedback, the pharmacovigilance data feeds into the continuous and living risk management process, whereby the benefit-risk profile of products on the market is continuously being evaluated. So, if you are still unsure whether you should get the COVID-19 vaccine because you're questioning its safety profile, perhaps due to the fact that in your locality it is still approved under an emergency use case or scenario, then consider the following. Since COVID-19 vaccines have been available for quite some time, if you consider now getting vaccinated, you actually benefit from a vastly, humongous, huge pharmacovigilance data set that is probably unprecedented in pharmacovigilance history. And no other medicine on the market anywhere in the world would even come close to this type of pharmacovigilance dataset. And here's concretely what I'm referring to. Since we were able to start the global vaccination campaigns, to date there have been over 5.78 billion, that's with a B, COVID-19 vaccinations given. Considering the relatively short time frame in which all of these vaccinations took place, COVID-19 vaccines must be by far the most well-studied and understood vaccinations or medicines for that matter on the global market. And after all these COVID shots have been administered, the benefit-risk profile still stands clearly in favor of getting the vaccine. Side effects that have been reported are no different than for any other medicine or vaccine for that matter. So I strongly urge you, if you're hesitant, please go and get your vaccine. You protect yourself, your family, and you can be certain that the vaccine is much better studied than any other treatments that have been touted in case you do end up getting COVID-19. Certainly, you significantly limit the risk that you may be hospitalized to COVID-19, and this also gives a well-deserved break to all the healthcare workers, which after all this time must be getting really tired and exhausted of trying to help the general public. Finally, one last thought. If you make a comparison, the analogy to smoking, it is well accepted, at least in the US and fortunately for quite some time now also in Europe, that smoking is hazardous to your environment and the people around you. Therefore, it has been common practice and very well accepted that when you smoke, you're asked to leave a restaurant, for instance, or any public place to go outside. And this is to ensure that you not endanger with secondhand smoke the people around you. Now, how is this any different with regards to COVID vaccine? If you're unvaccinated, you are a potential hazard to the people surrounding you. So, in locations where a COVID vaccine is required, for instance, to go and eat in a restaurant, it should not be any different than in the smoking example. If you're asked to remain outside because you're not vaccinated and therefore a hazard to the people surrounding you, well, you might be outside with the smokers, so to speak, where you limit the risk to other people. Therefore, The best approach to protecting yourself, your family, your loved ones is to be vaccinated. This is the quickest way for our society to go back to a fully normal life as we used to have it before COVID-19 struck. I hope you found this content informative. If you know somebody who might benefit from listening to this and viewing the video, please consider sharing. I hope you do get vaccinated, and I hope you stay healthy.